Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Super Dandori Bros Podcast, the first podcast. We are your hosts, Leighton and Ryan, and we are here to talk about all things Nintendo and games, and specifically today, the Nintendo Switch 2 announcement. We hope you stick with us and enjoy this conversation we have about the new exciting opportunities that are, well, I don't know about opportunities, but exciting new things on the horizon.
Yeah, I gotta say, the announcement trailer, that was a pretty slick looking trailer. Like, it looked really, really nice. Like, obviously, there had been leaks and we'd seen the thing already. And so in that way, it was sort of already spoiled. But the way that they presented it, I thought looked really, really nice. They clearly put a lot of time into that.
Absolutely. I think it's funny. I see a lot of people online saying that they think this trailer was like a reaction to the leaks. I disagree. I know what it takes to make some of those things, and that was clearly a trailer they've been working on for a long time, probably well before the leaks started. And it just so happened, obviously, that everything in it was the same as the leaks. But yeah, they put a lot of effort into how they wanted to present the new system, showing that it's the same but different, really highlighting the differences. They obviously didn't get into a lot of detail, but I think they really don't want to. They just kind of want to whet everyone's appetites, get everyone thinking about it, and then do the big reveal in April.
Absolutely. I feel like because Nintendo has been in the game for a long time, they're obviously very secretive, and they're also very theatrical when they do come out and they show something, that it may have felt like a reaction to the leaks, but I think that because what they wanted to show is essentially anything, like if their plan originally was to have this, if they've been working on it for a long time, like that essentially encompasses anything that could leak. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like anything else, like games and stuff like that, is obviously being handled separately. Is not something on the manufacturing floor or anything that could really leak in the same way. So I feel like maybe that's why people felt it was a reaction to it, but I agree with you. I think it's something that they've been working on for a long time, and I think it just sort of like encompassed everything that like we could see from just photos,
Yeah, and because the trailer was more than just showing off the hardware. What a lot of people don't realize is, like at the end of the video, the fact that they have this experience event going on that we've both signed up for. We're going to try and go. And we're very excited to try it out before it actually releases, because I have a feeling it's going to release after this experience event. But in order to have those events lined up for people to register and have addresses and everything lined up, like that's something you have to get planned way in advance. Like you don't just turn around and say, "Hey, can we rent this place and we're going to have this big thing going on and we're going to register it." Like they had to have all those details ready to put in the trailer. They had to know for certain that they were going to have their direct on April 2nd. Like there's so many things they had to have ready, not just the presentation of the trailer, but all the details to follow. So I think there was a lot of work going into this, and people like, oh, they had to because of the leaks. I'm like, I think they genuinely, this was when they were going to release it. This is when they wanted to talk about it. And yeah, it just felt, because we've been, I've been following the leaks pretty heavily. So it did feel kind of like, oh, they have to talk about it now. But in all reality, like most of the people that own a Switch probably had no idea there was any leaks. And this was a big surprise for them.
Yeah, probably like a vast majority of people like were like it hit the mark with them exactly the way that Nintendo originally allowed it to, or wanted it to. It wouldn't surprise me if like it's really just a tiny minority of just very vocal people online that were like really heavily paying attention to the leaks, and for them, unfortunately, like it, in some ways, like they didn't get that much additional information out of the trailer, but at the same time, like that's just sort of the way the cookie crumbled. One question I did have for you though, with regards to like the live events where you can like play with it, is it reminds me of back when the 3DS was launching, and there would be like specific Best Buys, for example, that would have the 3DS on display. And I remember you and I went and checked it out together to see the 3D effect for the first time, which I felt like obviously had to be done in person. It's not something you could really show over the internet, over like a YouTube video. Like you had to see the hardware in person. Did they do this for the Switch 1 as well? Or does this hint that maybe there's something that we don't really know, or that maybe the rumored mouse functionality, which as far as I'm concerned was all but confirmed,
Yeah.
in the footage. Like, is there something that we're missing, like that we don't know yet?
I mean, I've had a theory about this for a long time, but obviously have nothing to go on other than just a hunch. Mainly from the original leak way back in the day when there was this survey that went out on YouTube that asked what system you want to play, and it was Xbox Series X or S. It was PlayStation 5, and it said Nintendo. I don't know if it was Switch Attach or just Nintendo Attach. And that word attach, I don't know if that was a typo or there was something weird about it. And everyone clung to it and they're like, is it going to be called Nintendo Attach? Well, clearly it's not called Nintendo Attach. But I've just had this theory that the Switch 2 is more than just a system with more spec bump and some different Joy-Cons, is that the magnetic connectors or the extra USB port all have to do with these accessories that they may use to expand the capabilities of the system without compromising the core system. So you can still buy a Switch 2 and play games normally, but if you want to try something different, you want to experiment, you could buy like an external VR headset attachment, or you could buy some, I don't know, that's the only one I can think of that could potentially need some hands-on demoing, but it could be something else entirely, like a second screen or just other kinds of wacky attachments you can do for it. And they want to show you all the different things hands-on. But it also, I mean, to just be real, it could be just Nintendo feeling like, hey, we don't want a Wii U situation. We really want people to go hands-on with this. We want to push the marketing as hard as we can so people understand this is a new system. Because I saw a lot of people reacting who are not big-time Nintendo people who kind of just thought it was the same thing. They still, despite all the little things they were showing, didn't quite get what was different about it. So I think there's going to have to be a little bit more going on that we don't know about. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting. I mean, obviously, we just have such a tiny snippet of what it's going to do, and I think there's definitely a lot more secrets that Nintendo hasn't unveiled.
Absolutely. The thing that's in the back of my mind is if you just look at the trends for sales for Nintendo consoles, like obviously the Wii was a money printing machine for them, and a lot of it was the casual audience. And the Wii U obviously didn't sell very well. And that can be blamed on the marketing for it. It could be blamed on maybe just, the third-party support, the games. You can blame any number of things for it. But my fear with the Switch 2 is that because we had the years of the Wii U and it didn't sell well or whatever, and the Wii sort of aged out, that there was sort of this vacuum for Nintendo content, and people get nostalgic after a time, and it wouldn't surprise me if people wanted another Nintendo system, and then that amplified the Switch sales numbers and it got super popular because of that. And I'm just worried that it becomes another Wii U situation where maybe the people who did casually buy a Switch or whatever, for whatever reason, don't jump onto the Switch 2 in the same way that the casual market didn't go from Wii to Wii U. And that could be a totally unfounded fear. That is something that's in the back of my mind that I am slightly concerned about, but we're just going to have to wait to see.
Yeah, I think this will definitely be more of a DS to 3DS situation than a Wii to Wii U for a couple reasons. I mean, just because the name alone is going to indicate that it's a new system, and the gaming population has changed since then. I feel like it's way more socially acceptable to be into video games and to play video games, and there just seems to be a lot more people in there playing games, and the Switch appeals very much to just so many different people. I think Animal Crossing is a huge example of that and how well that sold. I mean, obviously, it came out during COVID. There was a lot of factors that helped boost its sales, but it does show that there was an appetite for that style of game. And there's a lot of people now that have had that taste of Animal Crossing or taste of Mario Kart or taste of one of those games that is a little bit more simple, family-friendly games. And I think the next system, there's just, as long as they can make it very clear that this is new, this is different, and they can make a compelling argument for what makes it better than what was before, I think they'll still sell well. I don't know if they'll hit the same numbers. I think that's asking a lot. I think they kind of got lightning in a bottle with that one, but I don't think that they're going to be a colossal failure like the Wii U. I think that they could probably, at the minimum, hit half the sales numbers
Hmm.
of, which is basically what the 3DS did. It hit, mm, well, not quite half, actually. 3DS, I think, sold like 60 something million, and the DS sold 154 million. The Switch is at about 145 million right now. So the Switch 2 would have to hit at least 70 to 75 million, which I think is pretty doable, if depending upon the longevity of the system, if they can keep the games flowing. Keep in mind too, because Nintendo has consolidated their handheld and console market, they can pump so many more games out, which I think is really what's going to sell the system. So um, I think it's built a good brand. You look at PlayStation, right? PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, like I think people kept buying it because they know that's where the new games are. So I'm hoping that that's what will happen with the Switch. They're kind of almost following in Sony's footsteps when it comes to that. So
Yeah, and not just Sony, but like also Apple too. Like,
mm,
just looking at pretty much the entire tech sector, like, the numbered moniker and just incrementing that, I feel like is just much more acceptable now than, it was when we were kids, for example. Like it's just much more easily communicated and just normal. And so I think, the Switch 2, obviously everyone was like calling it that. I think it's hilarious that then they ended up being like totally right. It actually was like they actually did call it the Switch 2, which, for the longest time felt like it made the most sense, but was like the least likely possibility because it made, it was so logical to do it. And the fact that they did go along with it, I think, will be very helpful, as you and I have like discussed like privately before.
yeah, no, I think it's huge, and I think Nintendo was very much caught off guard by the Wii U and how poorly it did. They really thought, because the Wii did so well. I mean, obviously
Mm-hmm.
it's not as good as as the Switch or everything, but it was probably no, it was their best selling home console ever, like better than anything they'd ever had before. So yeah, that's a testament to that console's success. But again, the naming was just so bad. They just thought that people would somehow just know that it was a new system, and people just thought it was a new attachment, and also because Nintendo kind of set themselves up for that. They'd made all these like Wii Fit and Wii other name stuff, Wii Play. So by just putting U at the end and then showing a tablet, and then to be fair, if you look at the Wii U system itself, it doesn't look that different from a Wii. It
I
really
was just
looks
about to say this.
it
Yeah.
looks so. I have one sitting up like right behind me, and it's like it's yeah, it's you wouldn't tell the difference. I mean, it plays Wii games too, and it has Wii remotes. It's like everything about it just made people think, because most casual people are like, "Wow, the graphics are so good." They didn't care. It was like it's just they bought it for Wii Sports. So I think they definitely misread the room on that one. I think they learned their lesson. And again, the stakes have never been higher for Nintendo now that they've combined those two sectors. When the Wii U failed, the 3DS was still doing okay. It wasn't terrible, great, but it wasn't, it sustained them. They don't have a second or third pillar anymore. Their third pillar, or the second pillar now, is their theme parks and their movies. But their video game sector they're all in on one thing. It's got to work. So I think it was smart to go Switch 2. I think they're still going to have a uphill battle convincing people that this is a new system. They're going to have to obviously pump out a lot of exclusive games to get people to want to switch, which is what I think the new Mario Kart's going to be for. Obviously, Metroid Prime 4 is probably not going to be exclusive, but I really do hope they have a Switch 2 version to showcase the capabilities. They're going to have a 3D Mario before the end of the year because it's Mario's 40th anniversary. And probably a couple other IPs that we haven't thought of. Probably, I'm thinking either a Splatoon or, I don't know, Kirby, maybe. But usually, I think there's rumors that there's going to be a Kirby remake coming to Nintendo Switch 1. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a running joke. Kirby's always finish off the Nintendo systems. So
Which may
uh,
which may definitely be true in this case. Though at the same time, like because all Switch games are forwards compatible
mhm.
with the Switch 2, then like technically in some ways they have actually sort of gone back to having two systems. They're both handheld like hybrid, but depending on how long they keep Switch 1 on life support, like they technically do have a backup now. Like it is in some ways a second pillar, but it's just in a different dimension than previously. Like previously it was like two parallel, products, but now they're almost sort of in series, and it's just however long they want to keep it alive before, I guess, maybe the Switch 2 install base grows. Like, I don't know what their plan is,
Yeah,
but
that's a tough one. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place on that one because on one hand you have an install base of nearly 150 million people, and they know the numbers of like how many of those people are actively using the Switch. So there could be a chance that we're saying, look at all the Switches sold, but then only like, you know, 20 million are actually active. So it's hard to say like what the actual numbers are, but at the same time, there's still a huge install base of people there. And to just completely abandon them is tough. They could still make money selling Switch 1 games. And actually the big thing now is the NSO because like you've got all these Switch 1s that can still play all the N64, Super Nintendo, all those old games. You could just keep pumping out new, NSO games on there, and indie games could probably still mostly work on it. So it's like, why not allow some of those games to still release on both systems? But Nintendo has to now also kind of switch their focus to just exclusives for the Switch 2, try to move people to the Switch 2 without completely shutting down the Switch 1, kind of let third parties and then let their own NSO, like I guess the virtual console type games go there. Because if I was, you can keep raking in money from those people on an annual subscription. If they just want to keep playing the games they have on there, playing online, they want to keep playing Mario Kart 8 online, let them. They're paying for NSO. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's a tough one, but we'll see how Nintendo handles it. I think it really comes down to how well the Switch 2 sells in the first year, this first fiscal year. If they do hit the 20 million target that they're hoping to hit, then they'll probably just drop, they'll drop the Switch 1.
And I think that hopefully they do hit that, and hopefully they do like just move entirely to the Switch 2, like, because otherwise I could envision, just from a casual outsider's perspective, that they could just sort of end up in the same bucket that Sony's in now, where they're essentially supporting two consoles at the same time, because pretty much every game releases for both of them. Not every, but a lot of them release for both. And as someone who owns both a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 5, and I talked with my wife about like, oh, like this new game's coming out, maybe we should get it. If there is a price difference and it's available for both, we routinely go for the PS4 version because it's usually like $10 less or whatever. And so I think, that is potentially a pitfall of supporting the Switch 1 for longer. So hopefully they hit the mark and they transition pretty cleanly.
Yeah, and there's also the thought of, do Switch 1 games run any differently on Switch 2? Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, do PS4 games run better on a PS5?
It's tough for me to tell, to be honest. I think some of them do. Some of them, I think, so at least in my experience, the difference is more easily observed, obviously, if you have like a free upgrade. So like, for example, No Man's Sky, PlayStation 4, like if you had the disc or I believe the digital version as well, like you just got a free upgrade to the PlayStation 5 version, like no questions asked. And a lot of games were like this, like Marvel's Avengers was like this too. And there are a bunch of them. You can actually like there's like an article with like all of them on there, and I always check that to see, can I just get the PS4 disc and upgrade if I really wanted to. But so in that way, yes, like some PS4 games like do definitely perform better on PS5. I've heard some reports that others do. For me, it's like I have a hard time telling. Some people are really good at that. I don't know if they just have a better TV than I do or what, but some people are really good at telling. I have a really hard time personally. So that I don't know.
Yeah,
but
because
the upgrade situation, I do. That's like the only thing I know about.
Right, because they had, during the PS4, there was the PS4, then they had the PS4 Pro, and I believe there were certain games I'm sure they ran differently based on which of those systems. So when you put in a PS5, it's basically running at the PS4 Pro version, probably with like maybe unless there's like you said, a free upgrade where they actually, or $10 whatever upgrade to the new system, like it probably still runs at like the highest PS4 level possible, which is pretty phenomenal. I mean, it looks, that's what I'm kind of like thinking, like that. It's an interesting thing. I think Nintendo's actually kind of played the market very well, because if they do somehow hit that PS4, maybe even close to PS4 level fidelity, just about every game that's been coming out for the last 4 or 5 years can run on it. So they can basically capitalize on all the games that have been on the PS4 and even some of the games that have been coming to PS5 and all that. So it'll be interesting to see how third parties handle it. And I don't know. But yeah, I don't. As far as the transition goes, yeah, it really comes down to what Nintendo can do to offer more than just prettier graphics. Like obviously the Joy-Cons have some extra functionality. It looks like they have mouse controls, which look really cool, but it'll be interesting to see if that is a system seller or just I feel like it's only going to appeal mostly to like more of the PC market, whereas people who are used to playing on consoles are probably going to find it almost more annoying because they like using controllers. I personally will think it's great. I'll use it where I can, but I don't know. There's got to be more. It can't just be they've added mouse support. Like there's another trick up their sleeve, and we just haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the obviously like one of the ones that we've sort of discussed, specifically like tying into the Switch attach moniker that was, cycling around last year when we thought, oh, maybe that was the new title, is that extra USB-C port on the top. Like, yeah, I could totally see it just being like an extra charging port for if you want to charge it while it's in, in stand mode. At the same time, I feel like it can have more than one function. It's likely to have more than one function. And so it wouldn't surprise me in the least if we do, like you said, like have different attachments for it, or there's something that maybe we don't even learn in April. Like truly, like maybe we don't really. And because I don't remember when like Nintendo Labo came out, and granted, like, that was cardboard. It wasn't, its own like electronic attachment, but at the same time, it was like a new way to use the system. And I think it was a very interesting experiment. I don't know if it's as successful as they wanted, but at the same time, like I feel like that does sort of show us in a way like a dimension in which Nintendo does think. And so I 100% agree with you. I don't think we know the whole story, and I personally don't think that we get the whole story even in April.
I think we'll get more just because, again, it comes down to we're not sure what's going to happen with these experience events. I have this feeling that there's something they want us to try. It could just be games, though. Honestly, it could just be like, hey, try a new Mario Kart. Well, let's show you how it's different. But there's one thing I was thinking about, too. I've been watching the trailer quite a few times because I've watched a bunch of YouTubers react to it. And the Joy-Cons themselves, so if you look at a Switch Joy-Con, when it slides in, there's no connector when it goes in. Like it has a way to charge, but it's like I think it's more of like a conduction type charging for it. So there's no really most of the signal. I don't know if it communicates via near field communication or if it's Bluetooth the whole time, but essentially like there's no real connector. Whereas if you look at the Switch 2, it has that very specific plug in the middle that it connects to. It's very prominent and it has a bunch of pins on it. And I'm like, okay, there's no way that's just for charging, right? Like they don't need that much going on for charging. And if they could do conductive charging too with all the magnets and just hold it there. So there's more to it than just, I think that either A, it's going to do something with the controllers that we don't know, like they need extra bandwidth, or it's going to be used it's a high bandwidth port for other kinds of attachments that you can snap onto the side of the Switch. Because I just look at that thing and I'm like, no one seems to be questioning the idea that like, wait, why is there so much? Like, just assume it's a charging thing or charging in data for the controller. I think it's going to do more. It's just too much. Like, you look at a USB-C cable, they're so tiny and they can transfer so much data now. You can do video, power, and display and everything over one cable. So why is it such a chunky port? So my theory is that there's going to be some other attachments that get connected to the side. It could be, who knows? So here's another secret hope that has nothing to do with any crazy attachments. I hope they get more creative with like controller types. And what I mean by that is like make like Joy-Cons that look like GameCube controllers. Like make my Switch into like a big GameCube with a GameCube controller with a screen slapped in the middle, or an N64 somehow, I don't know, with a USB port at the bottom, so you have this chunky looking weird 3 Pro, like an old N64, looks like it's designed for someone with 3 hands, some alien. So you just plug in the bottom just for that extra little knob at the bottom. Um, I don't know, just do some funky stuff like that. They kind of did that. I think they had some NES controllers that they did that with the Switch, but they didn't do Super Nintendo. They didn't do, any of this. I think they could have way more fun with this, but it'll be interesting to see how far Nintendo goes. I mean, because they love selling accessories. They make so much money off that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm sure that makes it. That just prints money for them.
Yeah. Speaking of, how much do you think they're going to sell the new Joy-Cons for?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. So obviously I think it's going to be more
Yeah,
than
me too.
the Switch one. So I think one, more tech, though granted, they like to use a lot of seasoned technology. But I think it's more tech. I think they can get away with paying or with charging more. And that's really the thing, is it's not like how much does it cost to make. I think that presents sort of a floor of like, okay, if we're going to sell this, like we need to charge at least as much. But then you can go to any amount above that, and it's just how much are people going to pay for this. And obviously that diminishes the higher price you go, but like there's going to come a point at which they say like, yep, this is, an amount that we're comfortable with, that we feel we get, a good amount of money out of. We know we can get away with this, and it doesn't like alienate our entire fan base. So all that is a really long way of saying, I think at least $100 for a pair of them. That I think that is the floor.
I agree. I think the same. Well, because how was it? It was $80 for two Joy-Cons before, and then I can't remember how much the Pro controllers were going for. I think they were like 70. They were like 10.
It was enough that I never bought one.
Yeah. I just got so tired of the analog sticks and the Joy-Cons that I eventually bought one. I ended up buying two actually, because I bought one just to have as like a single, like just for me controller, and then I ended up doing like a Smash Brothers tournament, and I was bringing the equipment for like a bunch of kids. So I was like, I need more controllers. So I was like, I'm not buying more Joy-Cons. I bought a second Pro controller. I'm really glad I did, because me and my wife, we when we're playing, she gets a Pro controller, I get a Pro controller. The kids, they get the Joy-Cons and they love them because they pick their favorite color and they're fine with it. It doesn't affect them at all. But I'm a little more picky. Pro controller, best way to play Switch games, hands down. I'm hoping the Switch 2 Joy-Cons will fix that and make me actually want to use them. But I'm definitely going to be buying some Pro controllers. I think the Pro controllers will probably be somewhere between 80 and 90. And then, yeah, the Joy-Con pair will be about $100. I'm almost certain, especially if there's more tech in there that we don't know about. So we'll see.
Yeah, my hope, and I know it's just going to contribute to the price, and it's something that one of our favorite YouTubers, Nintendo Forecast, brought up in a video about a month ago, is Nintendo's patent on the magnetoreological technology in the analog sticks, that supposedly, the patent says that it provides variable resistance, sort of in the way that Sony's adaptive triggers do. And I think if you put that in the Joy-Con, obviously it raises the price. By how much, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But since, to my knowledge, that would be the first analog stick of its kind on the market, I could imagine that even if it doesn't come in the base Joy-Cons, like maybe they release like a mid-cycle revision Joy-Con, sort of in the way that they did with the Wii remotes, where like eventually they just sold with the gyroscope built in, but originally the Wii Motion Plus was like an attachment. Even if we get sort of like Joy-Con Pros at some point or something like that, I would like to see it. That being said, like with how the Joy-Cons in the video that released yesterday were designed, it looks like it covers over it, over the Joy-Con. It's less exposed than the original ones were. Whether or not that is that magnetoreological technology or something else entirely, maybe it's for to address drift or something, or maybe it's just an aesthetic thing. Who knows? But it wouldn't surprise me if these things end up being actually quite pricey.
Yeah, I think they're definitely, because I think they're going to make sure that they don't have drift this time. I think they don't want that headache. So there's a rumor that they're putting a Hall effect Joy-Con or analog sticks in there, which are immune to that. I don't know how that plays in with the patent, if that is specific to a different type of technology, or if like Hall effect plus that can be combined, or how that works. It does look like they put some kind of cover at the bottom of the Joy-Con. That's what that colored piece is like a little like curtain or a skirt to kind of
Mhm.
help debris from going in there, which is I think what was causing the drift was that if you look at your controllers after a while, they get that like kind of white powdery kind of stuff around them.
Mhm.
And I think
Yeah.
that gets in there. And then because the way I'm not a super technical. I've watched a video about it once or twice, but there's basically like it's like a little sensor that basically when that debris gets in there, it just affects it and causes it to wick out, which is where drift comes from. And these analog sticks were unfortunately more prone to it. And I don't know if that's because of the profile, though I don't think so, because even my Pro controllers are starting to get drift. And from what I've heard online, I know that it seems like the Nintendo Joy-Cons are more prone to it, but from what I've heard online, all controllers can get drift. It's not like, I mean, Sony controllers have gotten drift, Xbox controllers have gotten drift. It's just, I guess they tend to get it much later. But I guess the Joy-Cons, because they would only be within a couple years, it's just, yeah, it was more annoying. But it's funny how people got all over Nintendo for it when it's a problem that happens in, I guess it's just, yeah, it was just more common with Nintendo, but it's still, that's my annoyance.
It's really funny that you mention the drift in Sony controllers because the first time I ever experienced it was in the PlayStation 4 controllers. My wife and I have owned like 4 PlayStation 4 controllers over the course of just owning, our PlayStation. And I have had to tear that thing apart so many times to clean it out. And I mean tear it apart completely. To the point where at one point I ended up trying to solder a new analog stick onto it because the cleaning it wouldn't work anymore. And so it was so much worse than when I took apart my Joy-Cons to replace them with originally I just replaced them with new analog sticks, and then eventually I did it again, but with Hall effect analog sticks, which worked much better in the end. And I don't know if they were available the first time I tore them down, but if they had been, then I definitely would have I would have preferred to have bought them because they work wonderfully. But yeah, I can absolutely say that it was not unique to Nintendo. I think Nintendo's just particularly infamous for it, though I've had way more problems with Sony personally.
Yeah, because in my time having a Switch, and I bought mine day one, I've only had two Joy-Cons have that issue, and I have, I think, 8. And obviously, like, they all get used at different rates, but I sent those two in. I got them back. I've had 0 drift issues on those Joy-Cons. I do tend to use my Pro controllers more, so that could be potentially why I'm starting to get drift with the Pro controllers. But again, and I've had the Pro controller since probably the first year as well. So that's almost 8 years of using that controller, and I'm only just now starting to get drift. And sometimes if I just blow on the controller, it seems to go away. So, uh, I've looked actually to see if they do make Hall effect Joy-Con analog sticks for the Pro controller. It doesn't seem like they have anything. They have them for the Joy-Cons. You can put Hall effect in there, but they never made it for the Pro controller. But yeah, I think Nintendo's definitely gonna. I'd love to see that patent though. I do think that'd be super cool. It's a shame that they couldn't have like a uh, adaptive trigger as well as that, like kind of go all out. But then the controllers would cost. Maybe they'll do a Pro version, but probably not because no one's making software for it. It has to be with the default controller, or no one's gonna incorporate it into the software. But
Yeah, I remember back when the leaks for the Switch 2 Joy-Cons happened, and one of people's original complaints was like, hey, the shoulder buttons, they still aren't analog, which obviously a lot of people love from the GameCube days, myself included. But now that we know about, or at least we suspect, uh, about the mouse functionality of these things, obviously, let's say that you're holding the Joy-Con such that the infrared sensor is pointed, at the table or whatever. The standard R button on your right Joy-Con is going to sort of be like your left click on the mouse, and the ZR is going to be sort of your right click. That would be very jarring if ZR was analog and R was just binary. You know what I mean? I almost feel like that in a way is sort of like the mouse functionality almost eliminated the possibility of an analog trigger. Whether or not they were ever considering that, I don't know, but it would be very weird.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's such a good point. I hadn't considered the idea that, yeah, if you're trying to use a mouse, you don't want an analog button on there. It just feel so weird. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do wonder though, how the Pro controller is going to be, because I doubt the Pro controller is obviously going to have the same mouse functionality. It'd be kind of funny to be like just dragging your Pro controller across the table. But with the right now, the Pro controller has essentially identical functionality to a Joy-Con, minus I guess the infrared camera, and that's I guess it. Maybe maybe the motion control is slightly different I know it's gyroscopic still though. But yeah, so I wonder, what tech will and won't be in the Pro controller. And it'd be cool if they did add analog triggers to that, just so that if you want to play GameCube games with, but they know they won't do that because it has to be universal across everything, right? Because if you're playing in handheld mode and you don't have analog triggers, but then your Pro controller doesn't work. So yeah, it's just unfortunate. I think Nintendo kind of put themselves into a corner there where they just can't really win. To be fair though, like I think the number of people that would get benefit from analog triggers and the number of games that would benefit from it are not enough. And maybe that's just me, and because I haven't had analog triggers, I just don't care. I mean, I'm sure if I had it and I found the right games for it, I definitely would be like, wow, this is life-changing. But I think most people, since they haven't been exposed to it or just don't play games that it matters in, they just don't care. And then Nintendo's just like, look, if you want analog triggers, go get a PlayStation.
Yeah.
That's basically their answers. And I think that's kind of their answer for a lot of things. If you want pretty graphics, go buy a PlayStation. If you want those games, they're not really worried that PlayStation has all these games that they can't run. They're just like, that's what they're for. We do our thing. And that's worked out pretty well for them this last 8 years.
Absolutely. And I mean, as someone who plays a fair amount on the PlayStation 5, and so I'm pretty used to analog triggers, I can't really think of anything in my game library in particular that like requires analog triggers. So even from like a third-party support standpoint, like I mean, I feel like the nice thing about the analog triggers on the the PlayStation 5 is essentially just the adaptive trigger functionality for like if you're drawing a bow, like you get variable resistance, sort of like we were talking about with the analog stick. But apart from that, like it's not like it was like the way it was on the GameCube with like Luigi's Mansion or Mario Sunshine, where variable pressing of the shoulder button actually did have different functionalities within the game itself. Like for most games it that I've played, it just sort of feels like binary, but maybe I'm like totally missing something. Maybe I'm playing it completely wrong.
Yeah, I think it's just for a lot of developers, because they're making a lot of these, especially third-party developers, right? They're trying to make a game that just works across all platforms. So they don't usually like to make features that are specific to, maybe they will if there's like an exclusive agreement, or they just know that most of their players play on a certain system. I don't know, but like I've heard some people say with the adaptive triggers, if you do racing games, it feels a little nicer because there's like some kickback on that. If you're doing shooter games, it feels more like recoil. So obviously, but they always do that at the beginning of the lifespan of the console, and then they kind of like, no one cared, so then they just kind of get lazy at the end and they stop doing it. And Nintendo's had the same problem. They introduced some cool gimmick for some of their systems, and then nobody uses it. The IR camera on the Switch was only used basically by Nintendo, and in the weirdest ways. They had some WarioWare games, they had 1-2-Switch. The big use for it was probably with Labo and with Ring Fit. But other than that, it just never saw anything. And that doesn't look like the Switch 2 is going to have it, which is why they had the disclaimer in the trailer. Certain Switch games won't work on it because they're like, well, the Switch 2 controller won't fit into the Joy-Con or the Ring Con for Ring Fit. And obviously the Switch won't work with Labo because it's made for the size of the Switch. But yeah, and so yeah, Nintendo, and even the 3D and the 3DS, it was a really cool feature, but towards the end of the life, they were literally selling 2DSs because they knew people weren't using the 3D, and they were just like, all right, well, that was cool, that was fun, but there was only a few games that really felt like you needed to have, like it helped to have 3D, like Mario Land, sorry, 3D Mario Land. So
yeah. That, and then I personally liked it for the Ocarina of Time remake for just aiming the bow. I felt like that like was very helpful, but I think that I am probably the biggest fan of the 3D feature in the world. Like I'm pretty much in any conversation that I have about the 3DS, I'm the only one who's like, oh yeah, I really like the 3D feature. I used it all the time. That being said, for like games like Pokemon, like specifically Pokemon X, I believe, when you turn on that feature, it started to chug. I mean, it was bad. So there were some games where like it did just become absolutely unplayable, and I can see why, like with Ultra Sun later on, like they just didn't have 3D features at all because well, that game just barely ran at baseline, let alone trying to run the 3D effects.
Right. Well, Smash Brothers, I'm amazed that it was able to run. I think it had 3D. I actually don't remember because I don't think I played it with 3D, but I think they had to just drop the graphics like crazy in order to get it to that 60 frames running on a 3DS while doing 3D. Um, and I think what happened, the problem with the 3D was like the original models, if you had to be in this really good sweet spot to get the 3D effect. And since half the games had like the gyro controls and stuff too, which just made it really difficult. Now I ended up getting a new 3DS, which had the face tracking. And that I suddenly actually did want to use the 3D because I could move at different angles and it still kept everything 3D, which was really cool. But unfortunately, it was kind of one of those too little too late situations where I just was like, yeah, I just was already used to not playing with 3D. I liked having consistent frame rates, so I kind of just turned the 3D off, which is a shame because it was a cool feature and there were games where I really liked it, but it's kind of it was a little jarring. And I think for some people, it was like motion sickness. The same way VR gives certain people more motion sickness than others. The 3D just, and also there was some health people that came out and said, yeah, it's not good for children. So they're like, that's why they had to make a 2DS so they didn't get in trouble.
Yeah.
But, at least they made a slider, right? If they hadn't put a slider in there, they'd be in real trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. If it was just on all the time.
Right. So, but yeah, I'm sorry, redirect. But
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what new gimmicks they come up with.
Yeah, I think it'll be a really good console. And I think moving on to sort of the next part of the trailer, at least that I want to talk about, is the game that they showed off with it. I think there were sort of essentially three options for what they could have shown. Mario Kart, I think, was sort of the obvious one, and that is what we ended up getting. I think the other one that at least I had been considering was potentially look at a new 3D Mario. But I figured that may not necessarily be the most likely option, considering that like how like crazy well Mario Kart 8 sold. And then of course the last one is a game that we already know about, which is Metroid Prime 4. And I thought that was probably the least likely option. But at the same time, it was one that we sort of already knew about, so I could see it, being on the list of possibilities, and it was for me. In the end, I am glad that we did get to see the new Mario Kart. I think there's some things that we learned about it, and I think it raised a lot more questions than answers, which I think was the entire point. But overall, like it looks like it could be a big departure from what we had in Mario Kart 8.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Mario Kart 8, it's 11 years old now. It's definitely, it came from back when it was a updated version of Mario Kart 7, basically, just with HD visuals. So it's harkening back to a very different era of Nintendo, and it's good to see them kind of trying to change things up a bit, not just from a mechanic standpoint, but even from a visual. Like all the characters definitely look like they got a bit more of an overhaul. They're a little bit more reminiscent of the Super Nintendo versions of themselves, a little more chibi, a little more like, I don't know, just rounded. They've changed Donkey Kong to look more like his original video game counterpart, which is the one they featured in the Mario movie. And the big thing, of course, is that it looks like they're going to have 24 players, 24 racers. So I'm curious to know if that's going to be the default or if that's just a mode that you can play, because that sounds like absolute chaos.
Yeah, there was one comment that I saw on one of the videos, which was imagine 24 players on Baby Park.
Yeah, 24 players on Baby Park, green shells only.
Which I think that would be the best. I would love. So one thing that I did see that someone mentioned I think it was Arlo actually that mentioned it, which I thought was actually kind of an interesting idea, is if they went with sort of an elimination mode. Like once you get with like that many players, sort of like with the way that F-099 works
Hmm.
in some cases, where it's like you gotta like stay in front of so many players in order to progress. Like it wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing at least a mode like that. Like maybe that's not the default. Maybe that's not even the only way to play with 24 players, but once you start increasing the number of players, like your options open up considerably for what you can do with it. And it does make me wonder, like, yeah, they've got the 99 games connected to Nintendo Switch Online. Like, are we going to see like some elements of that sprinkled in the next Mario Kart? Like, is that something that they're playing with? I don't know.
I actually, now that you mention that, it got me thinking. I really do think that's what's going to happen. And the reason I say it is that they have been doing these 99 games for a while, right? And they're
Mhm.
super popular. Tetris 99, super popular. Mario 99, F-Zero 99. They're all like, well, no, Mario wasn't 99. Mario was like Mario 35, I
Yeah,
think.
35, and it's no longer available, sadly. I
Which
never
is,
got to play it.
yeah, I didn't get to play it either, but it was
I think it comes back as for 40, and I think it's just going to be Mario 40.
just
You know what
Mario
I mean?
40, but like maybe with like new Super Mario Brothers or Mario Wonder graphics or something. But
Yeah.
I think it was so popular. So Nintendo's like, and the reason I think it could be also for Mario Kart is that in Mario Party Jamboree, they added basically almost like a battle royale mode for it, where basically you
Hmm.
have like 20 something players, and it's like a bunch of minigame gauntlet, and you're like trying to survive, and of course like the last one standing wins. And so it's like, okay, they're obviously experimenting, and Nintendo kind of does this where they kind of try things with small scale. They kind of throw concepts out there early to see what people think, and if people gravitate towards the concept, then I feel like they're like, all right, let's try this in a different place. So we're gonna do it in Mario Kart now. So it's just basically Mario Kart 99, except it's just Mario Kart 24, and it's just gonna be just a battle royale racer, but like endurance race,
Hmm.
where you're just basically going for as long as you can. Who knows? Um, I have so many thoughts and ideas. One of my theories with Mario Kart 2 is I said this to you. I want to put it on the record here so that if I'm right, I can come back to this video and say I was right. But I I'm predicting that this going to be called Mario Kart Road Trip. Like it's not going to be called Mario
Hmm.
Kart 8 or 10 or something. I don't know, but like maybe it is Mario Kart 9 Road Trip or something. But because the vibe of the setting just kind of gave me like cross country road trip vibes.
Hmm.
And I just thought that would be such a creative, fun way. They've done Mario Kart Tour, but Road Trip just kind of has a fun like aspect to it, and it like I don't know. It's just like I can imagine it being like you have your multiplayer, and you have your 24, and you have all the modes you're used to, but then they actually add in like a Mario Kart campaign mode where like you
Hmm.
basically travel cross country, like road trip to different areas. And it's like not quite open world Mario Kart, but kind of where you get to like kind of almost like Need for Speed or things like that, where you could like drive to different parts and then like there's missions there, but then you instigate the mission. So not Grand Theft Auto, but like you could drive around this overworld, right? And then you just kind of I don't know. That's just a thought I had. Where obviously you don't want it in real time. Where like, yeah, I'm going cross country. It's going to take me 3 days to get from California to New York. But it's just something kind of fun where there's a little bit more single player focus, maybe even co-op focus, maybe just more like kind of like how Brawl had Subspace Emissary, but now they're like Mario Kart's going to have its own kind of fun single player mode that's not just Grand Prix. So
Yeah, I could totally see that. I think it would be really cool if they did have something like an adventure mode where you could go and maybe like, sort of like we talked about privately when you first talked about it being potentially Mario Kart Road Trip, where you essentially like, let's say you drive to one area where like this one racetrack in the game is, and you like run into a toad, and the toad's just like, oh man, I can't race on this track because this Goomba is just being a jerk and I can't race, and the entire like point of the game is racing. It's sort of like Nintendo does with a lot of their games. It's like, you run into like these quests of this character can't do the thing that the game is based on, and so you have to do the thing in the game that you do to solve the problem so then the other character can do it. It's essentially like the Nintendo formula for how they handle a lot of the side content in their games. And so like it wouldn't surprise me if at least maybe not this one, at some point, some Mario Kart somewhere in the future, we do get sort of an adventure mode, and maybe, you collect coins along the way. Maybe they're like side quests. Maybe you get cart parts, doing it. Like, you could like make a fundamentally different Mario Kart experience than we've had before. And I think in some ways, like, I don't like to read a lot into like Nintendo's like grand plan in terms of like what they did with Mario Kart 8, and like what like that anything that happened with Mario Kart 8 in any way dictates what they're going to do with Mario Kart 9, because I don't necessarily think that Nintendo's past behavior is always the best predictor of their future behavior. In some ways it is. You can get some trends, but like, I think that just because we got all of the tracks in Mario Kart 8 doesn't necessarily mean that we won't get some of those tracks in the new Mario Kart necessarily. At the same time, I could also totally see a world where, because we did just sort of get like the greatest hits of, Mario Kart in the past, that they're like, okay, now this one can be different. I could totally see that. I don't think it's guaranteed, but like, we may be in for something very different this time around, because we sort of got the best of everything of the way Mario Kart used to be.
Yeah, I could see them like almost taking old courses and like redesigning them. So like, let's just take Moo Moo Meadows, for example, and they like turn it into this massive like giant course that's just way different. Like, so it's still kind of got the name, it's still got the theme, but it's just drastically different. So it's not like it's not just the same course but HD. So yeah, I don't know. Like, because I mean, it'd be a lot of work for them to do only original courses. They do have to have like their reoccurring bring back courses. I think it'd be super cool too if somehow they came up with a course maker. Like, if they really want this thing to last the entire Switch 2 generation, give it a course maker, and people will be making that and sharing that stuff forever. And people will be streaming it. People have custom courses, maybe even custom modes where you kind of like, how in like Halo you had Forge, and then people came up with their own game modes, like where you can basically make your own courses, but you create your own custom versions of battle mode, or your custom version. Like, people came up with their own game types because you just give them all the controls to just change settings. Make it so that the carts have less traction, make it so the carts weigh more, make it so that, item blocks, I don't know, it's just different things happen in the game. And so, yeah, you could make it really interesting. Who knows if there's other things that they're going to change, like physics could be way different in this game. Like Mario Kart, the physics are fairly predictable, but maybe they'll allow you to tweak the physics of the game a lot more, so you can get, cars are tumbling over or something. You can fall out of your cart.
It's totally possible. Before Mario Maker was ever a thing, I would have thought that Nintendo ever giving us the ability to customize levels, like, and have that be like a core functionality of like the game. I thought that was essentially restricted to like what we got in Smash Brothers Brawl, where it like really it was pretty limited in functionality. Like, it was cool, but I rarely ever played anything on there. But the fact that we got two Mario games, which was essentially like sort of its own like saga of Mario, sort of like they had the new Super Mario Brothers saga of Mario games. So we sort of got the Mario Maker saga, and before Wonder, and the fact that we live in a world where that happened, like, I am less skeptical now of us being able to do that in Mario Kart, especially now that we potentially probably will have mouse controls, which I think totally changes the game when it comes to being able to customize and design things, because fundamentally, like, moving stuff around and potentially changing the shape of stuff, and let's say moving, individual points, like if you wanted to alter the geometry of something, is much easier to do with a mouse, much more intuitive than it is with a control stick. And so I am much less skeptical now than I would have been, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, no, it's true. They opened Pandora's box on that one, and they've dabbled in this stuff before Mario Maker. Mario Maker was definitely the best version of their customizing, world building kind of stuff. But like in I don't know, I remember back in like Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, you had your own little custom room, little secret cave you could make. In Link, was it Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, they let you make custom dungeons. I can't remember if they did. I don't think they brought that back in Echoes of Wisdom. But so they've kind of dabbled with some, and like you said, with Smash Brothers, obviously that was like their first real dabble into that. And every Smash Brothers since then has had that functionality. So I think they like the idea, and obviously they've seen the popularity of Minecraft, and apparently Minecraft's really big in Japan. So I think Nintendo sees that there's an opportunity, and then user-generated content is almost like a cheat code for game developers. Like if you can create a game that lets users create their own content, then you almost can just let them make the game for you. They just kind of fill in all the gaps, and you just give them the tools. That's basically what Mario Maker is, even though there's some obviously curated stuff. I mean, 90% of what you do in that game is playing other people's levels. So, yeah, it's a, who knows? I think this is a new turning point for Nintendo. It's also the first time we're launching a system without Satoru Iwata. So, because the Switch was developed under his, he unfortunately passed away, I think, before the Switch launched, but he was part of that whole planning and idea. So this is kind of an interesting thing to see how this new Nintendo kind of handles this next step. Some people are saying that this isn't really like a very risky or creative move for Nintendo, and to a certain extent, you could argue that because it's Nintendo Switch 2. You know, there's only minor changes in some areas, but you could say the same thing about the 3DS. You could say the same thing about any PlayStation in a way. It's just more of the same too. It's just more graphics and slightly tweaked controllers. So
yeah, well, and I think that one of the side effects of consolidating the handheld and the home console markets of Nintendo is the fact that whatever successor to the Switch, to this even the Switch 2, there has to be a handheld. Like fundamentally, like Nintendo, like the Game Boy, the DS, 3DS, all of that, like instrumental in the handheld market, was pretty much the entirety of the handheld market. Now you're starting to see things like the Steam Deck come out that are going to give the Switch a run for its money, but the like ultimately, like Nintendo's going to continue having a handheld functionality in their console. Now, whether or not they separate back out into a home console and a handheld, I kind of doubt it. So I think that at least for the foreseeable future, unless handheld gaming fundamentally changes in what that looks like, or they were to pivot and make things entirely on smartphone, which I don't think is going, I don't think that's even remotely likely. Maybe they'll have some, continue to have some apps here and there, but I don't think that that's going to be their main thing. Then I think that we're essentially stuck with the Switch form factor or something similar until technology like dramatically changes.
yeah.
I think that we're essentially going to be getting that. And so I don't think in a way like, yeah, okay, it looks very similar. Well, I mean, what else could it possibly be while still being portable? Like essentially what you would have to do in order to make it like truly different is essentially just remove the ability to put it on the home, like in the dock, and play it as a home console, which I don't think that there is any advantage in doing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, because at this point with the Switch 2, if it really has the hardware that people are rumoring and leaking it's going to have, it's almost like we've hit the point where everything after that is just almost like a quality of life improvement. Like the graphics aren't going to look phenomenally better when the Switch 3 comes out in 8 years. They'll look better, don't get me wrong, but it's we're at the diminishing returns point. So it's all going to be more just a quality of life. Like now it can run whatever the new thing is at the time, whether it's AI based or whether it's just, some other function that we haven't heard of yet. Technology changes like crazy. But yeah, and also when you were saying the Steam Deck was giving the Switch run for its money, I went and looked it up. The Steam Deck has sold 3 million units.
Wait, really? It's that low?
It's only
it shows what I know about the market.
I wanted to look it up because I thought, well, I'm curious what it's done. It's like, yeah, it's only sold 3 million units compared to the Switch's 145. Which, to be fair, Switch has been out longer, but the Steam Deck has been out for like 2 to 3 years now. So it goes to show that it doesn't matter if you have more powerful hardware. You have to have a way to market it. You have to have a brand. You have to have, Steam Deck doesn't have exclusive games. At the end of the day, most of the people that buy a Steam Deck, they have a big PC. They're going to play their games.
Mm-hmm.
If they play this stuff on the Steam Deck only when they occasionally. It's an accessory to your PC. It's not a PC replacement for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And moms aren't going to go to the store and buy a Steam Deck. They're not going to see it at Target. They're not going to see it, and even then, most people, when you pick up a Steam Deck, they're fairly user friendly, but not that user friendly, not compared to what the Switch is. Switch is like about as easy as it gets. And some people consider that like, oh, it holds us back from doing the things we want. Steam Deck lets us do whatever we want. Like, well, yeah, that's because it's a toy for adults. And then the Switch is, it's made so that kids can play it. I'm not going to call it a toy or tool for kids, but it's definitely made with the idea that kids can operate it. But that means it's also accessible to adults, and it has plenty of games that adults will enjoy. So Switch is just way more accessible, it has way more brand recognition, it has the games that are exclusive to it. It's always going to own that market. And I think even if Sony tried to get back into it, I know Microsoft said, oh, we're going to try and get in. I'm like, you can't even handle the console market, let alone, I don't know how they think they're going to get into the handheld market. So it's an interesting game, but yeah, I mean, no one should rest on their laurels either. We don't know in 8 years, assuming that the Switch 2 does the same thing as Switch 1, lasts for another 8 years, we don't know what the landscape will be like then and what technology will be available, what consumers will want. We might be bored of the Switch form factor by then. They'll have to come up with something revolutionary by then, but I don't know. I'm excited for the Switch 2. I don't care that it looks very similar. I don't care that, I just wanted something with more power. I liked it, all the quality of life improvements they did for the Joy-Cons and hopefully the analog sticks. So I'm excited for it. I just want something to play Metroid Prime 4 on. I mean, I have something to play Metroid Prime 4 on, but I think this will play it better.
I think it'll play it better, and I don't use the kickstand functionality very much.
No.
But it also has a better kickstand, and I know at least for that, like my wife is going to be happy, and so that makes me happy.
Well, I think, weirdly enough, I will be using the kickstand more. One, because it's actually usable. The one on my current Switch is basically useless. But two,
it's garbage.
I think because of the mouse controls, I might be more incentivized to use it that way because I might want to have it on a table and just control it that way. If I'm playing, and if I want to take it on a trip on an airplane, I don't know, just any of those things, I might be more incentivized. There was times when I first got my Switch, I wasn't living in my house, I was living in a trailer, and so I didn't have a room, and I was playing it mostly handheld at the time, but I wanted to use the Pro Controller because I didn't like the Joy-Cons. So I'd use the kickstand and have the Switch sitting up while playing with the Pro Controller, but the kickstand was so flimsy, the thing would fall over. And so I think this new kickstand will make a huge difference. It doesn't mean I'm going to suddenly do it a whole bunch, but it might increase my usage by 5 to 10% at the most, but it's still more than I had before. I'm mostly a docked player, but I might go more handheld. So I might actually, be playing a lot more different ways than I was before because I think they've fixed all the things I had issues with the Switch 1.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I don't know, like, so I think it's a really good point with the dock, or not the dock, the kickstand and the mouse functionality, which may be one of the reasons why they really emphasized it in the trailers being better. I mean, not just because it was a criticism of the original Switch, though I think that the Joy-Con drift obviously got more press.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it may actually be a much more usable and like required to be used feature for some games, especially if that's sort of the only way to use mouse while on the go.
Yeah.
Then that may be why they like really emphasized it in the trailer. It's to show like, hey, if you're going to use the mouse functionality on it, you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think it also has a bigger screen, so I feel like it's almost, I don't want to say it's going to be like a little mini PC, because I don't think Nintendo would go that route, but I think you're going to be able to use it kind of more like like a laptop, like a PC. So I think it will be interesting to see what software Nintendo packs into it. If they have any like they always like to include some little things, and I'm curious to see what they do with that. And yeah, it's I don't know. We're kind of we've got this huge peak of excitement, and now we're kind of settling down again. We got to wait till April to find out what all the fuss is about. Until then, I'll just keep playing my Switch 1. It's still working. It's a day one Switch, and I'm just so proud of it. Just keep going. It's going to be 8 years old here soon. And yeah.
And I find it amazing that you have a day one Switch. And I mean, granted, you've mostly played it docked. And I got mine, I don't know, maybe like what, 6 months after you got yours or something. I can't.
Tell me about
I
that.
think I got mine like spring like 2018. So actually it would have been about a year afterward. Um, and like I don't know, maybe it's because I mostly play it handheld and I still have like the Joy Cons from like day one minus the replacements to the analog sticks, but like I don't know, it feels like a used piece of equipment. Like it's seen some battles, you know what I mean? And I think it's because I mostly use it handheld and whatever. So it's got the stains from holding on to it, and you know it's a much loved console. It was used a lot. Um, but I am in some ways looking forward to the Switch 2 because one, I think it's going to be a great console with some great games on it, but also just because it'll be like a new piece of equipment that feels new as opposed to one that it's like, man, if I stare at this thing wrong, like it bricks instantly. Like I'll never forget when I was playing Mario and Luigi Brothership on it. I still haven't finished that game. I need to. Um, it like I tried to pull it out of rest mode one time and it just wouldn't wake up. And I'm like, dang, Switch 2 is like, I don't know, 6+ months away, and did my Switch just brick because of Mario and Luigi Brothership? Like it got rated 5 out of 10 by IGN, but I mean I might have to rate it lower if it bricks my Switch. Fortunately it recovered, but it did seem like an omen of things to come that maybe it's time to move on from it.
It was like Metroid Other M to my Nintendo Wii.
Yeah, that one actually did
Yeah,
kill your
that
Wii.
was well, didn't kill the Wii, it killed the disk drive. The Wii actually
Yeah.
still worked. I was able to play all the virtual console games and migrate it to my Wii U, but and actually still have that Wii. If I could get a new disk drive in it, or anything like that, I could still use it. But yeah, I haven't touched it in a while.
Yeah, I think it's so funny how like we got Other M. We were like so stoked for it. We're like, oh, this is gonna be great. I don't think we looked at reviews for it, and we went to Costco, picked it up, threw it in your Wii. We got almost to the end,
Mhm.
and then it broke the disk drive. And so then you're like, well, I'm not gonna play it, so why don't you just take it home? And so then I had to play through it again to finish it.
Yeah,
And I am much more of an advocate for that game than 99% of the Metroid community. I think that there are some things about that game that I do enjoy. I'm not saying they're good. I'm saying I enjoy them, which is a very different thing. But I just find it funny how even after all these years, you still have not finished that game,
I still haven't.
and
It's on my
I
bucket
think you have
list.
zero desire to do so.
I do have a desire. I just don't have the copy of the game anymore. I have to go get it. So
Don't worry, I got a copy of the game.
yeah, I'll have to go borrow yours. But I still have the save file on my Wii U because it transferred all my Wii save to file. Every game I ever played on my Wii is still saved on that Wii U somewhere. I've got old like Zack and Wiki and like all these old games I played from way back in the day. I can go back and Red Steel. I mean, man, it's fun. As glitchy as that game was, that was a game that I really it was so underappreciated. The first one, I think it just had bad controls, but I just thought the game looked so cool and play. It was so much fun. It was kind of like the Golden Knife for me because I used to play 4-player split screen with a bunch of guys, and it was so goofy and janky and fun. The sniper was
That
like the
sounds
golden
great.
gun.
I actually own Red Steel and I've never played it. I played Red Steel 2, but I've never played Red Steel 1 and I own it.
You do, dude. We need to have we should just play through that together,
That sounds great
dude.
because it also sounds awful.
It's awful, but kind of in a fun way. Like it's such a
Yeah,
it,
like Metroid Other M.
yeah. Well, so yeah, maybe we're gonna have to start a series where we just go play through some of the worst rated Nintendo published or big time Wii games that were supposed to be good and weren't.
Sounds great to me.
So, well, Ryan, I think this is it's been really good getting to talk all this about the Switch 2. It's been a fun first podcast episode. I hope you've felt like this was a good time.
Yeah, I had a great time. I think I personally think this came out well. I will probably feel differently if I were to ever listen to it again because I feel like I have a voice made for silent movies, but hopefully it was more enjoyable for the audience.
Well, I hope everyone listening enjoyed this podcast. If you let's look forward to the next one. We're just starting out. We don't really have social or anything. We're going to be on YouTube. We'll be on Spotify and Apple Podcast. But yeah, just check us out and just keep posted. We'll be putting out new podcasts semi regularly. We'll trying to figure out our schedule, but we just really wanted to get this one out, the Switch 2. We're kind of doing this as a fun way to just kind of talk about Nintendo stuff, get this off our chest because we have a lot of thoughts and opinions about Nintendo stuff. So thanks for joining us. I'm Leighton. He's Ryan. And we will see you in the next podcast. Bye.
All right. See ya.